Hello, it's Matthew from Matthew North Music here, and that was my little pastiche on the opening of Justin Hawkins' YouTube channel, which is called Justin Hawkins Rides Again. And I thought I'd do a little chat video about Justin, rock and roll, Whitesnake and stuff, because I've been reading on the internet quite a lot, people talking about Justin Hawkins' YouTube channel. Now I'm fairly new to it, and I've been watching it for about the last 2 months, and I'm a massive fan of Justin, and I find his YouTube channel really interesting. He comes out with a lot of good stuff. He analyses various songs, bits of music, he talks about stuff to do with the industry, and he's a really bright guy. I'm a massive fan of Justin as a person. When I first met him, which was in August, I think, 2003, The Darkness were playing the Guildford Guildfest Festival. I was there with Arthur Brown as his crew, and when I arrived at the festival site, I saw Justin and the rest of the band walking around the car park, and they were putting flyers for their album, which hadn't yet been released, onto the windscreen of every car. And that to me shows complete commitment to the cause. And any band that's willing to put in that amount of legwork deserves to succeed. And I was really chuffed when they did succeed. And then I met Justin the second time about 5 or 6 years later, after The Darkness had ended. And he had a band called Hot Leg. And when I saw that band, I spoke to Justin after the gig. And he was as nice as pie as he was the first time I met him. That's as much as I know. Anyway, he's got a little bit of flack on by the enemy of all people about, well, maybe not so much flack, but bigging up the fact that he was talking about Jon Bon Jovi. But if you actually watch the video, Justin's actually very analytical about, you know, what's happening with Jon Bon Jovi and why his voice isn't kind of how it was. But anyway, I found, you know, what he had to say really interesting. So I do urge anybody that if you like listening to videos of people talking about music, as I say, I've always bigged up things like Word in Your Ear and the Rock on Tours podcasts, but Justin's channel's well worth watching. Now, he was talking a few days ago about David Coverdale. Now, I had a really interesting night out on Wednesday last week. I went out with my mate Andy from the band, and it's very rare that we ever both go to a gig where we come out with the same impression. But last Wednesday, we came out with the same impression, and that was that our money had been very well spent. What do? We went to see Whitesnake, Foreigner and Europe. They were playing Motorpoint Arena in Cardiff, which is a venue I've been to many times in the last 5 or 6 years. And it was absolutely everything that you would expect from a full-on rock and roll show. Every band gave it 115% all the way through. Great musicians, great players, and they played the hits. Europe came on first, and they were just completely solid. They interacted with the crowd all the way through the gig. They just gave it so much that I think a lot of modern bands just don't have that kind of interaction. I think particularly bands in the heavy metal genre generally do have more crowd interaction, but, you know, a band like, I don't know, your Mumford and Sons and your Coldplays of this world, I mean, or Muse, any of those sort of bands. I mean, I saw some of those bands in the early days. There was no interaction with the crowd at all, really. It was very much, we're up there strummy, looking at our fretboards, that's it. But, you know, Europe just gave it that sort of stadium performance. And then along came Foreigner. Now, it's a weird one because there was no original members of the band at all. They were all members that had changed. Did it matter to me? No. Did they sound like Foreigner? Yeah, they sounded just like the record, in fact, if not a bit better. Did they perform well? Yeah, they were brilliant. The reason there was no original members is because the main man's not doing every gig on the tour. I think he did the London one, but didn't do any of the others. Did that matter to me? No. And this is an interesting thing because I think bands now particularly rock groups, they're going to be like symphony orchestras, brass bands, jazz groups as well, in that the band will outlast the original members. I mean, Dr. Feelgood had been on the road for yonks with no original members. Tangerine Dream, who I saw not that long ago, no original members. But the band that really did it is Fairport Convention. Fairport Convention have just this week celebrated their 55th anniversary as a band. And they're a band I go and see a lot. I usually see them at least twice a year, if not 3 times if I go to Coverdale. But they had no original members. Not 5 years, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because in that time period, they've always had Simon Nicol. But 5 years after they started, they had no original members. They had none at all. And in that lineup, they made an album called Fairport Nine, which is regarded as one of the best Fairport albums. Certainly one of my favourite Fairport albums. But there was no original members. About 3 years later, Simon Nicol returned to the band. I think he returned in 75, 76, around about that period. But there was that period where they had no original members. Did anybody mind? No. Did anybody care? No. And I think rock groups are going to be like this. I mean, David Coverdale himself has said in some recent interviews that he could see a point where Whitesnake carried on without him. Now, would I go and see Whitesnake without David Coverdale? If they played a local venue, like Plymouth Pavilions, where they've played twice before that I've seen them, and I wasn't doing anything that night, yeah, I'd go and see them. Yeah, I would. I'd go and see them. It wouldn't bother me at all. Next week, week after next, I'm going to see Yes. They're doing a warm-up show for their UK tour, and they're playing my local venue, Tavistock Wharf, which is 10 miles up the road. It's a great place. I've played there a few times, and I've seen loads of great groups there. Now, Steve Howe isn't an original member, but he's the longest-serving member in the current lineup. Sadly, we lost Alan White a few days ago. So it's a band with no original members, although one of them's been with them so long it makes no difference. Now, if Steve Howe decided to leave Yes, would I still go and watch them? Well, based on the output I've heard of recent material, yeah, sure, I'd go and see them. They're a great band, they're making great records. Why wouldn't you want to go and see them? And this is kind of my point for discussion, and I'd really like to hear people's comments below. Do you think that groups should carry on without original members? Do you think they should stop if there's no original members? Some people have been arguing for years that The Who should never have carried on after John Entwistle died. But yet, I've never seen The Who with John Entwistle. I've only ever seen them after that era. But I've seen them 20 times or so, and they've been brilliant every time. I wouldn't have not wanted to have those experiences just because they lost the bass guitarist. So it's a really interesting discussion, because as time goes on, the classic bands are going to be less and less because of members passing away. I mean, I don't think you could ever have the Rolling Stones without Mick Jagger. That would never happen. That would never work. But other bands that have had different... I think a band, if they've lost their front person early on, an example of this would be the Yardbirds. Because, as some of you know, I know some members of the Yardbirds. I spent a weekend as their tech, which was good fun. But that band, when I was with them, the guy fronting the band, Andy Mitchell, brilliant singer, great harmonica player, all-round top bloke. I mean, he's younger than me. Did that matter? No, because the band were great. The band played brilliantly. They had the sound of the Yardbirds. They did the Yardbirds songs. You still had Jim McCarthy and Top Topham at the time. Great band. Worked. It just worked. But yeah, I don't think you could have the Stones without Mick or Keith, really. I think if either of them pass away, that's kind of... I don't think that could really work. It's that chemistry between the two. Same with The Who, with Townsend and Daltrey. You know, they are the two. And I think that is certainly how a lot of groups are. You've got, you know, you might have a group of 5 people, 4 or 5 people in a band, but there's usually 1 or 2 that are the key players. But then other bands, you know, they could carry on. I mean, I know Kiss this week have said that they're going to end after this tour, but could Kiss have carried on with no original members? I think they would have been a prime candidate to do that. In fact, it's almost part of the ethic of the band that they could carry on with no original members. Van Halen, now that's an interesting band. We've lost Eddie Van Halen. Could they still carry on? I think they could. I think you could have Van Halen without Eddie. They'd be a different band, but as long as you had either David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar fronting the band, I think they could still be Van Halen, yeah. But that's just my opinion. I mean, let me know in the comments what you think, whether these groups could carry on. And like I said, I saw Whitesnake on Wednesday and they were superb. And I don't think it would be easy to replace David Coverdale, but I don't think it's impossible, especially if David Coverdale himself said he wants the band to carry on without him, which is mentioned or alluded to in recent interviews. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please leave a comment in the comments thing, you know, down below, and give us a like. Feel free to share any of my videos as well. There'll be something new coming along in the not too distant. Got a few more electronic projects on the go. Anyway, I'll leave you as I started with this little ditty.